This is an introduction to my new book, Take Back Manufacturing, an imperative for Western economies. Now, it's time for us to take back manufacturing. My book is about the destruction of our manufacturing sectors in our Western societies, with significant loss of national prosperity, and why the imperative for Western economies must be to take back manufacturing. Now, I've been involved in advocating for the restoration of our manufacturing sectors for many years, and more about what I do at my websites. Now, there are many reasons why I publish the book now. Firstly, the perception that globalized manufacturing is a sustainable solution has changed recently. There are now concerns about the cost effectiveness and security of these global supply chains. Also, the increasing instability of the geopolitical environment has made the localization of an economy much more attractive than the past global view. And this has raised the level of political and citizen anxiety and provides an opportunity to have our message heard and allow us to advocate and assist with generating the correct political will and future policies. In the book, we don't pull any punches. We provide the history of what went wrong, what needs to change, a detailed recovery plan, and the policies for future economic prosperity. We explain that it will demand a strong political will that has so far been sadly lacking. We discuss many controversial topics that will affect the return of manufacturing, such as changes in economic ideology to enable a reshoring journey, the rebuilding of our educational system to support reindustrialization, improvements in industrial productivity through Lean and Industry 4.0, and the need for focused infrastructure spending and a fresh look at the need for more immigration, as well as a review of current climate change actions in concert with realistic energy solutions. Next, we're going to explain the history of what happened to our manufacturing sectors. In the last 30 years, most Western governments, due to neoliberal economic ideology, subscribed to the liberalization of international trade on a global scale. And the economists term this global free trade. Now, this dangerous ideology has allowed trade between nations with no controls on trade and trade balance. Due to this, we've relocated a huge part of our manufacturing capacity offshore to access this low-cost labor. It was herd behavior in a lot of ways, and it was certainly uncontrolled trade, and no one in authority questioned the long-term economic and ecological sustainability issues. Now, many of our local manufacturing sectors were either hollowed out or completely gutted, and some are totally destroyed and no longer exist as a local manufacturing capability. Now, maybe you worked in those sectors and will at first hand understand just how much we've lost. And from 2000 to 2017, we lost at least 20% of our manufacturing intensity, which means we lost a significant share of the value-adding contribution of manufacturing to our economy in terms of labor and associated support content. And this has had a significant impact on national prosperity. Now, in Canada, the changes in these supply chains forced many thousands of mainly small manufacturing plants to close, and we lost about 25% of our manufacturing jobs. Now, that's about 500,000 jobs. The manufacturing employees displaced were in many cases forced to accept lower paying and more precarious service jobs. Almost all of the job loss was before 2008, so it was uncontrolled globalization that created the decline, not the financial crash. And all of this dislocation of the core manufacturing population has created an ongoing skill shortage, as any upturn in demand for skills cannot be met by the destabilized, dislocated, and under-sustained labor pool. And this has been further exacerbated by employers who have neither the budget or the time frame or stability to offer training programs to maintain this labor skill set. The educational system has been a shadow of its former self as far as providing skill training in this regard. So we experienced at least a 10% decline in overall national productivity, with so much idle capacity both within the remaining manufacturing process and the inherent lower productivity of the service industries. And this has also generated a much higher level of youth underemployment within the Canadian economy. Now, these are trade trends for our Canadian manufacturing economy, and it demonstrates the dismal outlook we've described so far. We are seeing a 10 times worsening of our trade deficit, at least a 20% decline in our domestic share of the manufacturing goods that we consume, and a 50% decline in our global share of manufacturing, and also an extreme trade imbalance with mainly emerging economies that are using labor arbitrage to export products. As mentioned, we continue to experience ongoing and significant trade imbalance. The US trade deficit, since globalization started, is consistently out of balance, with the cumulative imbalance now more than 50% of the total US GDP. The Canadian trade balance, with the assistance of resource exports, has traditionally been slightly positive, but it's now also trending negative due to the excessive imports from a lack of local manufacturing. In Canada, due mainly to the elimination of our manufacturing sectors, we continue to experience ongoing declining productivity. To make things worse, in the same time frame, public sector employment was allowed to grow significantly. Now, this may have been a good ploy by our governments to make the unemployment numbers look better, but it has certainly further depressed national productivity. Now, debt is increasing on all fronts, both government, local corporate, and household debt, and we are also facing rank inflation and terrible prosperity. The future of manufacturing in many parts of North America now look pretty grim, with Ontario and other parts of Canada joining some states of America into a transition toward what is now known as the Industrial Rust Belt. And we've come to realize this journey is adversely affecting our national sovereignty and our prosperity, and this is a North American-wide problem. And so far, there's just been no political will to reverse this very dark journey. But there is some light at the end of this long dark tunnel. But first, we need to understand the problem some more. We decided to question the economics of onshore versus offshore as a business decision. This led us to undertake what could be called the biggest lean study of all time. It does generate some light at the end of the tunnel, as we will explain. Now, this global free trade approach is supported by globalized manufacturing, and this consists of using sea container technology to move materials from one country to another to access low-cost labor, and then moving the completed products to the final consumers someplace elsewhere using these waste machines. These container ships are the true waste machines of this global wealth transfer system. They add no value to the manufacturing process. There is no manufacturing done on these puppies. They just move non-value adding inventory around and consume very dirty bunker fuel. A 40-foot container docks in the USMCA trade region every 3 seconds. All the 90,000 container ships and the associated transportation devices and logistical processes across the globe are calculated to pollute more than 6 times all of the gasoline-driven cars on the planet. These sea container ships support the global supply chains. Now, these global supply chains are long, and they attract non-value adding process steps to the overall supply chain that are far from lean or green, and also attract significant waste and operating costs. The currently ultra-low interest rates enable these long-distance manufacturing activities that are inventory intensive and will become highly unsustainable when interest rates rise to normal levels to support a healthy, self-sustaining economy. So overall, this model of globalizing manufacturing is deeply flawed and is clearly unsustainable in both a business and ecological sense. The alternative is more balanced economies using localized trade blocs that are intrinsically less wasteful. Now, these would operate far shorter supply chains that are inherently lean and green with less process steps that will have operating costs that are an order of magnitude lower than the global supply chains. And they will also offer a far lower pollution footprint. And this will also significantly reduce the need for the wasteful and ecologically dangerous seagoing container ships. They would utilize local manufacturing much closer to the consumers, and this means trade will be far less sensitive to inventory and waste so that interest rates can be normalized upwards to better drive investment and prosperity. And this would enable faster and more flexible response to customer demand. Also, local manufacturing will provide a far more sustainable and stronger incubator for product development and innovation that can be far better coupled to the needs of the local consumers. Now, it's going to require much more localized trade blocs that will enable the national populations to make much more of what they consume and utilize more of their local resources as much as practical. This will involve curbing the current overindulgence in unnecessary global trade and make local economies and habitats far more sustainable. Now, this would also force economies to be in a far better balance as far as import and exports are concerned. Raw resource trade for the nations that need them for consumption within their own economies would not be disadvantaged. Knowledge trade involving intellectual property must be traded in a far more equitable manner. And when we investigate the feasibility of such a localized trade bloc, we find that, for example, a North American trade bloc that followed this sustainability agenda would need to import very little from outside its current trading bloc zone. If this trade model were applied as much as practical on a more global basis, it might offer a significantly better balance of economic and ecological sustainability, as it would force economies to better manage their own pollution as they create in their own backyard, as they extract, grow, and make and service their own economies and citizens. The outcome would be much more balanced and accountable national economies that will still need to be global trading, but as an option of last resort, rather than a duplicitous, redundant, wasteful, and destructive free-for-all we see now. In some manner, this is a return to original regional trade blocs that existed before the explosion of the global trade herd behavior of the early 2000s. Now, the trade consultants have generated onshore versus offshore balanced sourcing models that have correctly predicted that for a wide range of commodities, the USA and other mature economies are now at or close to the landed cost parity tipping point with so-called low-cost countries such as China. And the balanced sourcing model cost drivers include labor rates, transportation, and a significantly better understanding of many hidden costs such as quality, cost deltas, and costs of support for long supply chains, etc. So it's now much more certain that globalized manufacturing is far less cost effective and sustainable now that the total costs are better modeled and understood. So many industries have used these balanced sourcing models and have ran the numbers and are now actively planning to reshore product so that they will manufacture future product closer to their Western consumers within the Western economic trade blocs. The concept of reshoring has been talked about for a long time, and these balanced sourcing models are now available to assist businesses run the numbers. And here's a typical comparison between the earlier offshore scenario and 5 years later when the offshore costs had escalated past the tipping point. The model uses costs of labor, overhead, logistical support, and any environmental costs. Some of the movement toward a tipping point was because in the past businesses underestimated the actual cost factors in supporting a very long supply chain in different time zones in a different culture. Also, the cost of quality and inventory shrinkage were some of the factors that needed to be reevaluated and budgeted much higher. This has moved many businesses more toward an early reshoring solution. By 2020, many businesses were certainly evaluating the reshore option, or certainly actively moving towards reshoring. Into the future, we see this local manufacturing advantage being maintained, even if new low-cost countries with ultra-low labor rates are added to the offshore supply chains. Any tariffs or local trade barriers will only add to the localized manufacturing closer to consumer advantage. And as we will explain later, as new technology and automation is added, the sensitivity to low-cost labor as an opportunity will further diminish when traded within the delta cost of long versus short supply chains, especially with increasing interest rates inflating the cost of inventory and its associated costs. However, not all products will have the same rate of movement toward the tipping point, so it remains very important to continue to run the numbers. Another consideration is the additional capital that may have to be factored into the reshoring activity to rebuild capacity within the local supply chain. Now, in many cases, this will mean that reshoring will have to be synchronized with natural recapitalization cycles allocated for new products or new technology. But again, this must be included when the numbers are ran. In summary, this reshoring strategy will ensure that where possible, we make much more of what we consume with much more of our own resources. Many factors are now forcing a change in trade structures from liberalized global trade towards more regional trade blocs. And the political driven initiatives will be driven by both citizen dissatisfaction with low prosperity and more directly via geopolitical changes that will force deglobalization. In parallel, business initiatives will drive reshoring due to the cost advantage of local rather than long global supply chains. This reshoring journey will require local recapitalization to rebuild the local supply chains and will also demand support for new infrastructure. There will also be a need to be focused on retraining the citizen population to improve their ability to become manufacturers again. This journey to take back manufacturing will need firm, focused, and well-coordinated efforts between government, the educational institutions, and industry support organizations. And they will need to undertake a common roadmap that follows three parallel imperatives. Our Canadian national government must develop new industrial policies and plans that are far better aligned with the North American USMCA trade bloc partners. The USMCA trade bloc partners together must form a working coalition that creates a unified social contract with a focus on a no-nonsense productivity and prosperity agenda. The goal will be to move away from a global free-for-all and minimize wasteful global trade, resource waste, and environmental pollution. These North American governments must make the USMCA a true trade bloc that enforces the suppression of past wasteful international trade agreements. And this will reduce unnecessary and duplicitous offshore imports with a firm move toward localized trade. And this must also, where practical and possible, leverage the advantage of local natural resources. Now, this will start a significant and much needed reshoring gradient that can better manage the trade balance. In this manner, we end up developing a well-controlled and enforced regional trade bloc with a strong focus on more balanced trade and far greater national border controls on all forms of trade and capital transfers to ensure we generate a far more sustainable economy. We must all agree that the notion of building an economy around just services while also supporting significant levels of imports, even if you have resources to trade with, is clearly not the way to get prosperity. It's clear we won't get rich on services or just shipping raw resources out of our economy without adding any value to them. So the direction is to make much more of what we consume rather than continue to import them. This means we will minimize the need for imports and reduce the need for exporting resources or products or services to pay for them. We must all agree we will need strong manufacturing, resources, and services blended into a balanced economy. The USMCA will need a long-range energy plan with nuclear power as the main thrust to support industry and the electrification of our modern society, which will grow, so we can reduce unnecessary pollution. Also, short to long-term energy strategies, including oil and gas, must be developed, including transnational pipelines to ensure overall continental energy self-sufficiency. Both pollution reduction and energy security can only be achieved by moving as quickly as practical to a nuclear energy solution and avoiding the disaster of unreliable wind and solar. So far, none of these issues that we've mentioned and their solutions gets noticed by a continuously distracted and unresponsive Canadian government. They remain fixated on multilateral solutions with a reliance on free trade and the global economy. And also, they're fully consumed with worrying more about who we are rather than how we're doing. And this situation must change very soon. We need to change the culture of our educational system from a focus on selling education and knowledge to the highest global buyer and more toward a citizen-centric integrated industrial learning system. This learning system must serve all age ranges of our population so we can relife our workforce. And this must include a better focus on basic literacy and a STEM syllabus across all levels of education, as it's clear that the current over-social liberalized education agenda is failing our citizens. Now, we have significant youth underemployment, and we have the erosion of even the basic skills in your general population. And this is going to prevent us from participating as a modern industrial workforce. The current educational environment consists of siloed educational institutions that do not adequately integrate training and work experience into their learning process. The proposed integrated industrial learning system will create an integrated and planned process of ongoing education, training, and work experience activities that are administered by a central controlling body. Also, this new learning system will provide counseling, aptitude testing, and induction very early in the career journey. In other words, rather than send our youth to school and then hope they eventually find a job, we introduce them far earlier into the industrial or business environment. And this will provide an integrated learning process of education, training, and industrial experience so that they gain the opportunity for a worthwhile career. The integrated industrial learning system must also be made available to mature citizens that want to upgrade their skills and employment capability even while they are already employed in a full-time job. And this can be done by using planned day release and night school programs. It's clear that the public image of manufacturing needs work. It's still perceived as dark, dirty, dangerous, deafening, difficult, and smelly, and highly unstable as a career. We need to change this image so that everyone views manufacturing as something to build their future upon. To achieve this, we must deploy knowledgeable industrialists into our educational systems to re-educate everyone, including the frontline educators who may not have a good grasp of manufacturing as a career. Also, our politicians and our government in general need a far better understanding of how manufacturing works and how it benefits our economy and our society. This is a must, and we are talking a culture change in our society about the value and respect for manufacturing. We must educate everyone. As we just said, we must change the image of manufacturing. We need solid PR by a much more supportive media with close coordination with the industries, the educational institutions, and government. We must take such action to attract young people toward manufacturing careers to combat the increasing skill shortages. This is where the industrial integrated learning system will be essential, including the early career counseling and induction process within our schools. We need our youth to start to see industry as cool, so that a new maker culture can emerge, so that we can rebuild a modern industrial workforce. To take back manufacturing, our industries must run the numbers on the cost of supply chains to confirm per commodity and for each product that shorter and local supply chains are least cost to their business. This should then promote a significant reshoring initiative across almost all industrial sectors. Now, lean productivity improvement must return as a focus to ensure local industrial capacity is far more productive. An Industry 4.0 automation strategy must become the main investment focus across North America, and the financial institutions must assist our governments in an investment plan for the long-term restoration of manufacturing using these strategies. Also, local communities must be supported so that they are better aligned to undertake the industrial growth. Due to this Industry 4.0 approach, we will need far less labor to drive productivity and growth, and therefore we will need far less immigration. And any future immigrants must come with firm employment offers and come ready with the required education, training, experience, and communication skills. Another reason for less immigration is that if we apply Industry 4.0 and lean practices to the somewhat bloated public sector, we can liberate a significant level of labor and redeploy these resources to the private sector to gain a much needed improvement in overall national productivity. Industry 4.0 is a key lever to enable a take-back manufacturing environment. And as we will show, it can eliminate any advantage of low-cost labor and improve the reshoring tipping point. Industry 4.0 involves the introduction of cyber physical systems within and into the manufacturing process. Cyber physical involves the connecting of computers directly to the manufacturing processes without the need for human intervention. It employs new disruptive technologies such as advanced robotics and sensor technology, integrated connectivity, and the ability to provide artificial intelligence such that the total process knowledge can be applied at the point of use in real time. Here is an explanation of how the application of Industry 4.0 aids the reshoring transition. When the labor hours in the product are very high, the offshore capability using low-cost labor may have an advantage over local and more expensive labor, even when traded with the cost of long offshore supply chains. But as the product labor hours are reduced using Industry 4.0, the offshore low-cost labor advantage diminishes, and the higher long supply chain costs push the decision toward reshoring. So it's clear from this chart that the more labor effort can be removed from the product and services with automation technology or smart design or lean thinking using an Industry 4.0 approach, then the more likely the tipping point will define a reshoring solution. So to summarize, if these three parallel imperatives are correctly coordinated and implemented by government, the educational institutions, and industry, with support from the financial sectors, then it will be possible to take back manufacturing and gain back our prosperity for all. Until recently, most economists embraced global free trade ideology with almost religious fanaticism, even when it was clear that it was not working for a large segment of the Western population. But now some economists admit that there may need to be a significant reset. And a recent article, The New Productivism Paradigm by Danny Roderick, demonstrates this welcome change in economic ideology. And it explains that we're moving from the disaster of financialization, consumerism, and globalism toward production, work, and localism. So in many ways, this is the exact change in economic direction that I've been suggesting in the TBM book and what I've been describing to you here. Further, if we listen to the geopolitical expert predictions, we may not have any choice but to take back manufacturing, because the long-range prediction is that globalization may just not work anymore. This will be due to a breakdown in global trade security if the USA steps back from this role, and also a deterioration in East-West relationships that may fracture the New World Order that will also disable global free trade. Also, and even more important, significant changes in global consumer workforce demographics, such as size and age, may mean that into the future, our largest consumer market and best labor pool may actually be within our local USMCA environment. And this suggests that we can thrive with these short and local supply chains inside the USMCA. And this certainly reinforces the need to take back manufacturing. In the book, we explain what we must do to have an ability to take back manufacturing and gain back our prosperity in the Western economies. And I encourage you to read this book and understand how we can follow a roadmap for our future economic prosperity and sustainability. If you want to buy the book or have questions or want to join my blog and give me your comments, go to www.nigelsouthwaiteauthor.com, and thanks for watching.